I was asked to talk about making India a global education powerhouse, and the title that I began using was, just make sure, we turn it on, that might help. There we go. And so the title I began using and thinking about was, can't see the forest for the trees, and taking a look at the panorama. Now I must admit that when I planned that title, I had no idea that the panorama that we're in front of last night and also here would be so spectacular. I'm a strong believer that we focus a little bit too much on the minutiae of education, and we don't focus enough on the rationale, the reason, the purpose of education. And so, if there's one thing that I want you to take from my talk this morning, and I must admit, it's been a theme that's been played throughout in the last day, is that I want you to have discussions with your staff, discussions with your peers, discussions with your students and your parents about what the purpose of education is. We spend too long looking at the minutiae. We become experts in the small, in the details. When was the last time that you had a conversation with your staff about why they became teachers, why they became educators? When was the last time that you had a conversation about why you entered this profession? I would imagine that most of you entered this profession not because you had a love of an algebraic formula, or you wanted to make sure that every student had 60 minutes of homework every night in high school or more. I imagine that most of you entered this profession because you wanted to make a difference. You understand that education is one of the best drivers to make a difference, not only for the individual, but also collectively in society. So I ask you to take a step back from focusing on the details. The details are not wrong. The details are effective. The details are what makes you a great teacher. But the details are only effective if you know where you want to get to. Focusing on the details makes you focus on minutiae, small elements, as opposed to the big picture. Take a step back, look at the panorama. What are we trying to get out of education? So what are the trees in the educational forest? What are these things that we focus on all the time? The most obvious one, and the one that's been dictating our lives in the US of A, where I'm based, has been testing. We have become a nation that has been dictated by tests, the timetables, the yearly plans, whether a teacher gets a pay rise, whether a school stays open or not, is defined by the testing regime. And so teachers become experts in teaching to the test. But the minutiae, the trees of the educational forest, are also curricula, are also qualifications or seat time or class time, professional development activities, in-service, pre-service, technology usage, unit planning, budgeting, social emotional learning, or STEM, arts versus sciences, project-based learning versus rote learning. Do you get the idea? It is everything. Now, I'm not saying these things are wrong, because they're not. But unless we know where we want to get to, then everything that we are becoming experts in is irrelevant. All of those things are probably essential in your classes, but only if you know where you want to get to. And we do not spend enough time, especially as we're training our teachers, and especially during our professional development in our schools or our districts or our states, discussing where we want to get to. So where do we want to get to? What is the purpose of education? Why do we subject our children, our youth, to 12 or more years of schooling? What's the purpose? Originally I come from Australia, as you can probably tell from the accent, but I live and work for the last 14 years in the US. And I come from an organisation called ASCD, which used to stand for the Association for Supervision and Curriculum Development. We're one of the largest education associations in the world with 120,000 members in 120 countries. And we've been around for 75 years. But it was 11 years ago in 2007. And that was in the middle, if anybody knows US educational policy, that was in the middle of the No Child Left Behind years, when schools were being closed if you didn't hit the right scores. I lived in Oakland in the Bay Area at that time. There were primary schools in Oakland that were teaching 3 hours of English language arts, followed by 3 hours of mathematics every day of the year. Because if they didn't hit annual yearly progress in their test scores, their school would be closed, their principal would be fired, and their staff would be turned over. No science, no geography, no drama, no arts, no PE. In many schools, no recess. So that was the situation. What we did in 2007 was we brought a group of leading educators, health professionals together and said, is the direction that education is going in the US and also globally correct? Or is it on the wrong path? If we put the child at the centre of the equation, not the test-taking regime, not the board of studies, not the budget, but if we put the child in the centre of the equation, what would that education look like? We began focusing all of our attention on the child, putting the child back in the centre. Now, this was a time when it wasn't politically expedient, nor was it financially expedient for us to do that. If we wanted to make money, if we wanted to curry favour with politicians, we would have jumped headfirst into the testing business. We are one of the largest education membership associations in the US. We carry some weight. We could have easily said, yes, we will take your testing and we will double it, we will triple it, and we will make big profits. But we actually said no. And we said no because we didn't believe that that was the right thing to do. We didn't believe that education should only be about academics. That's part of it. But we actually believe that education is there not only to develop the cognitive, but to develop what we call the whole child. Socially, emotionally, physically, mentally, civically, spiritually, as well as cognitively. So we launched at that time, and this has been my work at ASCD for the last 8 years, we launched our whole child approach to education, and we focused all of our work around this. And we believe that a whole child is one who is knowledgeable, emotionally, physically healthy, civically inspired, engaged in the arts, prepared for work and economic self-sufficiency, and ready for the world beyond formal schooling. What was that quote that they used yesterday from China? Good at tests, bad at life. How many of our students are good at tests but cannot survive in life? We have lots of students in the US even who graduate, get into university and drop out in the first year because they do things that each of us need. There's a reason it's in a hierarchy. If the child is not healthy, and not just physically healthy, but mentally healthy, socially, emotionally healthy, they either won't be at school by caring adults in a safe, supportive environment. And if they're not expected, every single one of them, to wonder, why aren't our children, to us imagine a child at 25? It could be your child, it could be someone you teach, it could be someone you know. I want you to think of 3 words that describe them. 3 adjectives. What characteristics, what skills, what attributes, what attitudes do they possess? I then want you to turn to a person next to you and have a quick conversation. Share those thoughts. This is meant to be strength-based. This is meant to be ideal. We do have people, when I ask this question, sometimes say, my son will be broken living in my basement. So unless that's what you want, this is meant to be an ideal. I'll give you 2 minutes to think and discuss, and I'm going to ask for some responses. Somebody on this table, 1 adjective. Happy. Resilient, say that, okay, or adaptable. What else? Optimistic. Focused with a goal. Determined. What else? Ready. Ready. What else? Good human being. Self-confident and ability to express himself or herself. Problem solving. Happy. Artistic. Empathetic. Alright, watch this. I ask this question almost every time that I give a talk. This is the response in Arkansas. A couple of 100 educators. We do it on poll everywhere so I can capture it. Happy. It's a word cloud. The more times they respond, the bigger the word gets. Independent, empathetic, confident, passionate, critical, community, humble, member. North Carolina. Happy, independent, kind, empathetic, passionate. Wisconsin. Resilient, independent, confident. Happy, successful, compassionate, good citizen, good human. New York, independent, confident, happy, compassionate, intelligent, hardworking, adaptable, persistent. Boston, curious, empathetic, creative, loving, innovative, compassionate, joyous, ethical. This was in Brussels. Do you get the point? What we want for our children typically is the same no matter who I speak to. What we want for our children is the same no matter whether it's parents I'm talking to, whether it's community agencies I'm talking to, whether it's school teachers, whether it's principals. What I then do is turn it back to the audience. If this is what we want our children to look like, if we want them to be open, happy, resilient, curious, empathetic, sustaining, careful, what are we doing in our schools to help them get there? And not once has anybody said, able to pass Year 8 algebra. Not once has anybody said, able to graduate high school. Not once has anybody said, proficient in English. Those are stepping stones. Those are the path that we go on to get there. These are the goals. At least these were the goals for the educators in Brussels. You don't have to agree with everything that was up there. I would recommend you go back to your schools and have the same conversation. Again, like yesterday when I mentioned it, I'm a strong believer in mindset. If your teachers believe that that's what they're trying to do, and you support them by raising the question, they will change their behaviour in the classroom. A couple of years ago, I was talking with a member of Arnie Duncan, who used to run US Department of Ed, one of his colleagues. And he said, of every teacher in the US, that they teach children and they don't teach content, I said that mindset shift would be huge, because all of a sudden I'm concerned if you're quiet and anxious in the classroom. I'm concerned if you heard yesterday, critical thinking, creativity, problem solving, vital parts of a child's development, civic participation, health indicators. These skills should be a goal of public education. This is an economic journal. This is not an educational journal. The OECD in Paris, Skills for Social Progress, talks about cognitive, social, emotional skills in order to succeed in modern life. They are powerful drivers of well-being and social progress. We want education. We believe in education because people can better themselves. Society can better itself. What they're going to need more so, they've always needed it, but even more so this century, are those relationship skills. Some people say, and this is true, there's no easy answer to how we solve this, but some people say, but we need to actually work towards getting our students into university, and they have to pass the exam. And the entrance to university is this bar they have to jump over. We're starting to see changes. This was a report put out by Harvard 2 years ago. It talks about how Harvard is deliberately looking at changing their acceptance of students to take more account into contributions to others, community service, public good, ethical engagement. Less focus on academics only. This was signed by over 200 leading universities in the US. We're starting to see a change. The way we make this change is to keep on talking about it, to keep on responding. You'll recognise some of those universities. Boston College, Columbia, Emory, Loyola, Marymount, MIT, Michigan State, University of Pennsylvania, Yale. We're starting to see a change in the reason why we educate, and that change, at least from my perspective, is bringing us back to the reason why we got into this profession to start with, or at least the reason I got into the profession. It's also not just in the US. Can we have the volume up at all on that? Okay. Or you can read the subtitles. There are examples, and you probably know more than I do, but there are examples here in India where it's happening. Go back one.
It's not your job. It's not your house. It's not how much money you made. It's not your level of fame. It's really your personal relationships that dictate your happiness and are the key driver of happiness.
Prioritising happiness, positivity. In Delhi,
schools are embarking on a radical experiment to teach happiness in classrooms. My name is Slade and I'm a correspondent for the Washington Post. These happiness classes are
producing a lot of workers of the industry, workers of the factory. We have been developing a very good human resource, but we have not been developing good human beings.
So, what are some tips towards achieving happiness? Activities like yoga and meditation can help, the curriculum says, as well as lessons on learning how to take pride in your work. The government is hoping Indian school children will learn to focus on knowledge and values rather than exam results.
we're starting to see a shift. You know when you walk into a school, whether that school is a school that you would like to teach in, which you would like to send your children to, you can sense the culture, the climate in that school. Wouldn't you want to teach in a school that is based around positivity and happiness and well-being, as opposed to purely test-taking or focusing only on the test scores? Focus only on the minutiae. Don't focus only on the mechanics of education, how it's done. Those things are important, but they're only important if we know where you want to get to. Ask what you want from an education system in your neighbourhood, in your school, in your state. Ask what your society wants. Ask what your children need from an education system. Ask what our world needs from an education system. Because we now have a responsibility not only to the individual child, not only to the neighbourhood, not only to the society, but the world is getting smaller. And we have a responsibility to develop citizens who understand they are part of this larger world. So take your eyes off the leads. Understand how what you do on a day-to-day basis fits into the local neighbourhood, the local context. Understand how your school and your neighbourhood fits into the larger region of the city, the society. Understand how Udaipur fits into the lifestyle and the needs of Rajasthan. How that fits into India as a whole, and how India then fits into the world. The only way you do it is to understand your role as an educator, the influence that you have, and also understand that you are responsible for more than just the red marks on their test. You are responsible for the next generation. What I hope you take away from this talk is an understanding or appreciation that you need to pat yourselves on the back. You play a huge role in society. Your teachers play a huge role in society. But every now and then, take a step back and start to think, what am I doing this for? And am I hitting those same goals for the child at 25? Are we targeting them? Are we reaching them? So, thank you for the work that you do. Thank you.
Thank you,